Good morning. Welcome to the Life After Life Club. Today I'm going to share with you an incredible experience that I still don't quite believe happened. And it has to do with my wife, Sherry, and her last days on earth. And it has to do with what happens in between life and death, and how we can help people make that transition a lot easier. First of all, I'm not one of those people who has studied this and taken positions on it and all of that. I came into this experience essentially a blank slate. I've read about past life experiences, I've read about stuff like that years and years ago, but I never had any experiences of any kind. I hear people hearing voices. No voices. I've heard visions. No visions. No matter what happened. I hadn't even been close to death that much. My dad just keeled over from a heart attack. I wasn't even there. My mom, at the age of 89, got run over. Sad, really incredible, but it was like 2 seconds. So it was like life came along and said, okay, you're gone. And then Sherry, who was just 65, ready to go out and set the world on fire, because she had gotten her business together, she'd gotten her speaking together, she knew who she was going after for clients, she knew what she did, and she was heading out into the world to make a difference. We even joined an incredible high-end coaching program. And as we sat in the first session, she said, I'm having really trouble getting comfortable. My back is sore. Within 2 weeks, we were in the emergency room having a CAT scan. There was a surgery, then it came back, and by September of 2014, she was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. Suddenly, our great future looked like it was going to come right back down to not much of anything. And for me, this was a shock, a surprise. For Sherry, it was the same. But I am amazed at the positive attitude that she took going through this entire process. And a lot of it came from the help that Jim had given her over the years in being able to keep a positive attitude. The doctor gave her 4 to 6 months in September of 2014. She lived 13. That just says a lot about what a positive attitude would do. And I knew her pretty well. I knew some of the things about her background, and I knew all of that. But as we got close in through July, August, September of 2015, and she started to decline pretty fast. She finally reached a point where she said, I don't want to linger. I don't want to stay around. I just want to close my eyes and be done. That's it. And she even said, I don't even think there is anything afterward. I just want it to be over. And you'll hear a little bit about why that idea got into her head and what it caused as we go through the story. So we're going through, we finally end up in hospice. The nurse is coming every 3 days. It's body deteriorating, guests coming, friends coming in. Eventually she said, I'm really ready to go. Let's not have any more visitors. And then we had a few friends come in, and then we had a few more days go by. And none of us knew what was going to happen. None of us. Finally, on November 1st, and my book is called 9 Days in November. It's the last 9 days of her life. On November 1st, 2015, her friend Denise was staying with her overnight. They woke up, Sherry looked up and said, okay, I'm going now. And she closed her eyes. I came out about half an hour later, and I looked. And at first, okay, eyes closed, but then I noticed she seemed to be working awfully hard at it. Like tense. I thought, this doesn't look like somebody who's about ready to go anywhere. So a couple of friends who were staying came over and they said, we're going to stay overnight. Hospice was still coming in once every 3 days. Everybody was getting exhausted. Her friend Susan Leone came over and said, I will stay until 3 o'clock in the morning. Then I'll stay here while you sleep. Kathy, who was another friend of ours. Susan got a phone call at 3 o'clock in the morning. Her husband was in hospice. He was taking a turn for the worse. She had to leave. Susan was a 30-year friend of Sherry's who wanted to stay. She wanted to be there for the whole thing. So she left. So I get up. Kathy's here. Denise is here. Sherry's about ready to go. And this is what she wanted. This is what we thought she wanted. Just close her eyes and be gone. She didn't go anywhere. She just stayed exactly the same. And then I checked my email, and there was an email in there from one of the Japanese students who'd stayed with us about 10 years earlier. She and her mother were flying in from Tokyo to see her. And I said, I don't know if you're even going to be able to talk to her. But they arrived. They walked in the door, and Sherry opened her eyes, and she talked. She even got on the phone with the sister in Formosa. And then she talked to me for a little while, and then she went back and closed her eyes again. And Kathy, who was her best friend from 35 years ago, took me aside and said, look, we're exhausted. I don't know how long this is going to go. It doesn't sound like long, but I've checked with hospice. I've checked the materials. There may be something else we can do. I'm going to talk to the nurse in the morning. We went to bed. Maybe she would slip away and we would be finished. So we get up the next morning, Monday morning, November 2nd. Sherry's still there. No change. The hospice nurse comes by, and she looks at Sherry and says, after Kathy said, is there anything else you can do? She said, we're giving you 24-hour nursing care. We thought, wow, we'll take it. Bring it on. The nurse will be here at 5 o'clock. Everybody breathed a sigh of relief. We'd been taking care of the body so much that we hadn't even thought about her spirit, her soul. We hadn't even thought about how we would take care of that. And now this would give us a chance to concentrate in a different way. And we thought, for however long it is. And then I thought, yeah, however long it is. And I asked the nurse, how long will it be? The nurse said, from everything I've seen, 12 to 24 hours. And so we're prepared. We're ready. We go to bed that night. We get up in the morning. The next nurse has come in. There was a little problem with the nurse because she did some things that she wasn't supposed to do. And we had to realize, well, we got to watch the nurses again or get a different one. Sherry's still there. Our head nurse comes in and says, wow, she's still here. And so we go through Monday, and there's no change, nothing happening, nothing going on. Tuesday morning, the nurses call and say, do we have to come? Yes, you have to come. She's still here. So the head nurse comes. I don't know what's going on, she says. And we sit with her, we hold her hand, and we do all of the things you're supposed to. You know, it's okay to go, it's okay to do this, it's okay to do that. And we go to bed and we get up Wednesday morning and it's the same thing. She's still here. The head nurse comes in. I got to rearrange stuff. I got to get more people in here. We got to find some temporaries. And Kathy and I are sitting beside Sherry. Kathy is quiet for a while. And then she says, "Do you mind if I tell you something?" And I said, "What?" Kathy said, "You know I'm a human relations executive. But here's the other thing you don't know. I've been working to become what we call a death midwife, someone who helps people cross over. I've studied a lot. I've worked with a few people. Something's going on here. I don't know what it is. Would it be okay if we did a short visualization where I guide her across a plane? This is all metaphorical, over a bridge and across a plane and up a mountain where she can relax and see if that helps." And of course, I'd heard of stuff like this. I'd never seen it, never been there, but why not? Why not? Let's do it. So Kathy sits down, takes Sherry's hand, says what we're going to do, and starts through. And they get about halfway there. And Kathy all of a sudden has this surprised look on her face. She said, "Sherry just stopped and said, 'Stop it. I'm not going there. Just stop.'" So they stopped. Kathy comes back and she says, "I don't know what's going on. I've never had this happen before. Nobody's talked back to me before." Well, if you knew Sherry, you knew if she wanted something, she'd probably talk back. Well, she did. Something was going on. We didn't know what. So Kathy said, "You know, maybe she has some people she has to either talk to or forgive or something like that. Would it be okay if I kind of go back into this space?" And I'm going to make a distinction here. There's our space where we're in the room, in the living room, beside the bed. And there's this other space, halfway between here and there, where we're about to go. So Kathy says, "I'm going to set up a place where we can meet Sherry, her spirit. And I'm going to call her in, and I'm going to do the Hawaiian forgiveness mantra with her and have her do that with as many people as she wants. Is that okay?" And I said, "Yeah, if it helps, it's okay." And so she did. She set up a chair and people would come in. And so I'm standing there by the bed. And I don't know what possessed me to do this, but I did. I thought, I wonder what this actually looks like. And it was like a lens opened up. And there was this kind of sandy, cave-like area with a distant bright light. And there was a spark with Sherry, and I stepped into it. And it was like I was standing next to her while she did the forgiveness exercise. I didn't know if I was supposed to be there or not. This was outside experience. But I'm holding her hand, not physically, but spiritually. And watched it happen. It didn't take long, just a few minutes. And then Kathy comes back. I step back. And then I think, should I tell her? Yes, I should tell her. So I said, "Kathy, here's what I did. I actually stepped into that spot." And Kathy looks a little surprised, and she says, "What did you see?" I described it. And she said, "That's exactly what I'm seeing. You can come along on any of our journeys." There was also a third person with us by then. Her name was Sherry Jolly. She was another longtime friend. And the three of us became the team that started to guide Sherry. And we are completely at sea at this point. We don't know what's going on. What is wrong? What is happening? Why is she holding back? And Kathy said, I've never heard of this before. This hasn't happened to me. I know somebody who might be able to help us a little bit more. She's a friend of another friend. She's a shaman type. Can I call her? And I said, well, let's keep that in mind just in case. So we go to bed, get up next morning. She's still there. The nurse is there. Kathy comes up to me and she says, by the way, we can communicate, but we can also physically communicate. I just found a way to do it. There's this little oxygen monitor they stick on your finger, and it monitors the heart rate and the oxygen level. And it's been on her finger for days now. It's been stuck at 2 spots. Heart rate about 135, oxygen about 98%. And Kathy said, if I want her to say yes, she can bump one of those up. If I want her to say no, she can bump it down. And we told the nurse. And the nurse says, you can't do that. It's not even connected to her. She can't control that thing. So she said, I'll show you. She pulls it off the finger, lets it reset to 0, shoves it back on another finger, and we look. It shoots up to 500%, stays there for about 5 seconds, then comes back down to the same numbers it had been all along. The nurse looks, walked away. So here we are, things are starting to happen. And then I thought, you know what? This isn't the first unusual thing I heard. Now I remember we were sitting around a few days before Sherry went unconscious, and half a dozen of us, and she looked up and she said, do you see all the people around here? Some of them are dead and some of them are alive, and my guide is sitting over on the couch. We looked around and there's nobody there except us, and then she just went on to something else. And so now this comes back. Now, wait a minute. Things are starting to get interesting here. I'm not sure what's going on. So we, Wednesday night, go to bed, and we come back Thursday morning. And Kathy says, why don't we do one more visualization and see if all of this stuff has done any good? Has it or hasn't it? So we sit down by the bed, and she starts again. She says, by the way, I'm going to make a molehill out of that mountain. Maybe the mountain scared her. And so she starts across the bridge, and she goes across the plain. Halfway there, Kathy all of a sudden really looks upset. She said, Sherry just read me out. I said, stop it. Don't do that. Don't tell me what to do. I'm not going anywhere. Just stop it. She said, I gotta call that shaman. So we went through the afternoon. Friday morning, she did make the phone call. I mean, this is a long ways in. And so we're sitting there Friday morning, and all of a sudden, her friend from Dana Point, Joy Tash, comes running in the front door and says, Sherry woke me up 3 times last night and said, get down here. So here I am. What's going on? Not much. We're still trying to figure out what's going on here at all. And then there was another knock on the door. And our neighbor from across the walkway, Diane Wood, who's here today, came over. And I'd like to have Diane tell you what she said. Diane, can you come up here? Because this is, again, another little odd thing. So tell us what happened Wednesday and Thursday.
About outside on the patio. Well, hi, everybody. As Lee was saying, Sherry was my neighbor and a very good friend. And she was a crack-up. You had to know the woman. She wasn't a serious person at all. She took everything seriously, but she wasn't a glum-faced worrywart or anything like that. She wanted to have fun, and she lived for life. Life had to keep her going, but she lived for it. So everything for Sherry was way up here, sometimes unreachable. But she was just hysterical. And he's talking about all these times the nurses were coming in and they're going to bed and people coming in and out the door. Well, I was one of those people. And Sherry had enough sense about her to know when I was there, I'd say hi to her. I said, "It's Diane." And she wouldn't say a word to me. She'd just be laying on the bed or the couch that she was spread out on. And I'd sit down next to her and I said, "What can I do? How can I help you?" And she'd pick up her foot and she'd throw both feet in my lap. She wanted a foot massage. So I started massaging her feet. I got lotion and I was just really going to town on her feet. She had the prettiest feet. So I got her, and that was my comforting thing to her. That was the way I could reach her, was by massaging her feet for her. And we all know that us girls do, and probably some men, when we get a pedicure, that's the best part, is the massage. So we all like that. It releases a lot of tension. And I could feel her just relax and go down. And sometimes she'd be asleep when I was through, and sometimes she wouldn't let me go. She'd say no, and I'd be rubbing those feet until my arms were sore. But that's what she wanted. So, do you want me to talk about the nighttime?
The nighttime.
Okay, this is at night, and of course I'm trying not to be a nosy, bothersome neighbor dealing with Sherry. I'm going when needed and checking what was needed, etc. And I'd gone to bed one night with Sherry on my mind. I just kind of fell asleep thinking, I don't know what else I can do. Because all of her needs were supposedly being taken care of. All of her best friends were there. Lee he should have been I don't know what you were, but you were there with your sword through the whole thing. And so I got up. It was about 3 o'clock in the morning, looked out the window because I could see the whole front of their house from my place. Saw the whole front, and I looked out the window, and I saw a woman, about our age. She was sitting on the little front patio area that they have in front of their house, and there was a lawn furniture on there. And I stood there at the window just kind of looking and thinking about Sherry, and then all of a sudden I see this woman sitting outside on the sofa thing, and I thought, well, who's that? And I didn't know. I thought maybe they'd called, and it was one of the nurses from inside. She had come out to get some fresh air, so I just kind of stood there and watched her for a while. And then she'd be gone. And then she'd be there. So I thought, well, I'm half asleep. It's 3 o'clock in the morning. What do I know what I'm doing? So I'm watching, and I'm looking, and I thought, she looks familiar. She had this tons of curls, black curly hair. It was beautiful, gorgeous, gorgeous curls. And she had thrown a red Afghan type of a blanket around her shoulders as she sat outside on this chair. And it must have been cold. Well, it was just November. It was cold. And she was shaking like this. When you get cold, you get the chills, and you get all tightened up, and you shake. And I thought, well, why doesn't she go in the house? God, she's sitting out there. And she was out there for a while, and I couldn't go back to sleep, so I kept watching her. Can you guys hear me? I feel like I'm going in and out with this thing. Okay. So I was there doing that, and I kept watching her. And she was so cold, this woman, that I saw she was shivering, just shivering enough so I could see her body shake with the shivers across the lawn. So I thought, well, she'll go in when she gets too cold. So I went back to bed, fell asleep. Got up the next morning, went over to give her my foot rub. And I said I don't know at what point I said it to you.
I think it was Friday.
I can't remember. But I said, who's out there last night? I said, I saw somebody on the patio at 3 o'clock in the morning shivering and shaking. Had black curly hair, and she had this red Afghan thrown across her shoulders. I said, who was over here at that time of the night? And didn't get any kind of response from everybody. We just looked at me like, I have no idea what you're talking about. And that person, I wanted to go outside and see this person at 3 o'clock in the morning, but I was just a little bit spooked. I didn't know what it was, but I just couldn't do it. But I wanted to go out and talk to her and see how Sherry was. Maybe something happened. And that person that was on the patio area was not there in the morning, of course. So I asked around. Nobody knew who I was talking about, and Lee said, "No, nobody but us has been here." So I figured that was somebody that was coming for Sherry. Sherry wasn't waiting, so she had to wait out on the patio in the cold, shivering. And it just happened, and I think she died within what?
About 3-4 days.
About 3-4 days after that. I never saw the woman again, and it wasn't anybody that we knew. That was one of the caretakers that kept popping in for her. So anyway, that's where I came into the picture, so I can verify everything he's saying. So enjoy the rest of the speak.
Okay, so this was kind of an unusual thing. Who's sitting on our front porch? Kathy had no idea. Maybe it's a guard or a sentinel or a who knows what. So at any rate, Friday morning, after all of these people had come through and all this stuff has happened, and Sherry's still laying there, no change whatsoever. No change. Kathy calls the shaman, who says, I'm busy all day, but I'll call you back at 5. So we went through the day and we did what we had to do, and we took care of her and we talked to her. And one thing that we did that I remember is we all sat around the bed just holding our hands over her like we were giving her energy. And while we're doing that, and her cat, Chico, got up on the bed as well and was doing it. So there were 4 of us. And as we're doing this, I kind of had that lens open up again and kind of felt like I was back down in this space where she was. And instead of seeing the 4 people around, I saw 3 bright lights, like there was energy coming down. And I thought, 3, there's 4 of us. No, wait a minute. I'm down here. There's only 3 of them up there. We did that for a little while. And we just comforted and we talked and we thought, what's going on? And I thought, I don't know. I know she had some problems years ago. I know there were a few things like that. But let's see what the shaman says. So at 5 o'clock, the shaman calls. And so Kathy answers, and she explains the situation, and the shaman says, well, put your hands on her feet so we can get a connection, and I'll see what I can see. About a minute later, the shaman says, her mother is blocking her from going over. And you got to do something about it. And Kathy thinks, this is like totally out of left field. What's going on here? And Kathy thinks, I'll put the phone by Sherry's ear and this gal can talk her through it. No problem. And the woman says, no, you're going to do it. You, Kathy, are going to do it. You have to get her reconciled with her mother before she passes. And Kathy says, I don't know what to do. The woman says, get out a pen. And she wrote for about 15 minutes. Directions. What are we going to do? Then Kathy gathers us around and she says, we've got to do this. We got to do this now. And here's what we need. We need a red ribbon. We need some candles. We need white rose or red rose. These are things to kind of protect us. And we need to call in some guards, spiritual guards, to guard the bed and Sherry and her soul while we do this. And I said, well, who? And she named off about, well, there were 8 of them. I don't have all of their names, but they were all, shall we say, the top spiritual masters in virtually every faith and religion, who came and gathered around to help us make this work. So Kathy says to Sherry Jolly, I have to tie this red ribbon to my wrist and to yours because we're going up into a place that can be a little dangerous, and you're going to have to pull me back if I get stuck. And we need to light the candles, and we need to have all of this going on. And then we need to call Sherry in and tell her what's going on. We're going to go up into what she called a matrix area. It's several levels, and the second level is where all of Sherry's spiritual connections are. And she said, I have to go in there, but it's dangerous because you can get tangled up in all of this. But what Sherry has to do is call in her mother and her father and her stepfather and mend the relations. And I'll explain what the relations were. Sherry grew up in Yuma, Arizona, 10 miles out into the desert. So she was isolated. She had 2 parents who were both drunks. They were abusive, they were yelling, they went to bars, they were, and then mother always told Sherry, you're no good, your grades are never good enough. She gets an A, the mother wants an A+. She gets an A+, mother wants an A++. There was a divorce. I have incredible notes that Sherry put in her notebook, and things she said even when she was 60 about this, about how it had affected her and how it had taken a lot of her spirit away and a lot of her self-confidence. And I could see it. She was very fun. She was very competent. She was a counselor. She was a therapist. She was amazing at what she did, but she always could get to a certain level and no more. She was married once for 6 months and single for 20 years. Could never get a relationship together. I was the first one that she got together, and we lasted 24 years. So I knew some of this. I found out other parts of it when I went through all the stuff later. But the words, her mother is blocking her, resonated because her mother was so awful to her. And then the shaman said, almost everybody passes over, but mother never did. There was something keeping her here. And I have a feeling a lot of it was Sherry's resentment towards her. Because there were things like at the age of 4, her mother tells her, don't call me mommy. And Sherry said, I had to ask her what her name was so I'd know what to call her. 50 years later, she still calls her Willa instead of mother. So it had a huge effect. And so we're thinking, okay, we got to do this. And we step into the in-between world, and we see the steps going up to the matrix. And Kathy says to Sherry Jolly and I, you stay on the first level. We'll be up on the second. We see 5 spirits come in. One is the good part of mother, one is the bad part of mother, one is the good part of father, one is the bad part of father. They've split. And one is her stepfather. The 2 pieces of each one come together, and Sherry faces each one up on this stand, up in this area, this level, and they talk. They have to agree on whether they're going to keep the connection or not. And they do. And Sherry cuts the connection with both her father and mother, and they fly off. And then she turns to her stepfather, who she was mad at because he died on her at the age of 95. last living relative, and he was a stepfather. And she was ready to cut the ties, and he looked at her and he said, "No, not yet. We still have things to do together. We still have things to do together." Now, you start to see what's happening here. They have a future. Where's that future? Could it be here again? Maybe. Could it be in this intermediate area? Could it be there? Could be all of the above. So I'm starting to get pictures of how this whole thing is working out there. So we finish with that. We all come down. We come back to Sherry's spot. She's exhausted. We go out and have some dinner. Kathy says, "Whew, I am so tired. I need a big steak." So we go down to the Lone Star Steakhouse, which is, I guess, dead now. And we had a big steak. We come back, and the shaman has called and said, "By the way, there's 2 other questions. Was she married before?" "Yes, but it was inconsequential." "And did she like Christmas?" She loved Christmas. She had parties. She had this big tree up every year. We decorated. We had presents. We had friends over. Christmas was her favorite holiday of the year, and she was going to miss it. So Kathy says, "Think of a gift, both Sherry Jolly and I, and let's go have Christmas with Sherry." And I thought of one. The 3 of us went down back to this place where we have set up for her, and call Sherry in, and she comes, and Kathy says, "We're going to do Christmas." And Sherry's all happy, and she jumps around, and she says, "Wow, wonderful." Says, "Decorate this place any way you want." Big Christmas tree goes up, lights, balls, everything, star on the top, garland all over the place. She's making this a big festival. And so we say, "We have gifts for you." I think Sherry Jolly gave her a little carved cat. She loved cats, a lapel pin. And I don't remember what Kathy gave her, but I gave her this beautiful red furry coat. She loved red. She loved fur. And she's dancing around and having a good time. And we're about ready to leave. We've got 1 step out. She says, "No, wait. I have gifts for you. These are all spiritual gifts. Nothing physical." So we come back in. She gives Kathy a beautiful crystal ball. It says, "Now you can go out and help other people like you're helping me." And then she turned to Sherry Jolly and gave her an amazing beaded necklace. She loved beading. She made gifts like that for everybody. And a bracelet, and said, "Now you look sexy." And that was the first in-joke between 2 people that Kathy did not know. So she didn't know what this meant. It seems that Sherry Jolly had been single for 18 years after her divorce, and she'd been looking for a guy, dating all sorts of people. Sometimes she dressed a bit provocatively, and Sherry would always tease her about being too sexy. And so it was the little in-joke between the 2 of them that Kathy knew nothing about, yet Kathy brought it out. And that was my first thought, that, now wait a minute, something really is happening here. Something's going on. And then she turned to me and she said, "Here is this beautiful pocket watch. And it has Disney hands on it, Mickey Mouse, because she loves Disney. And it doesn't tick." And she said, "It doesn't tick because here there is no time or space. This is the gift of eternity. And I thought, wow. What do you say after that? We made our departure, and we just looked at each other like, okay, I think maybe we did it. Maybe we finished. Maybe we're done. She should be at peace now. We all go to bed. Saturday morning comes. We walk in. It's possible she slipped away at night, but no, she's still there. No change whatsoever. Something's still going on. Now, you see the picture up here. There's a beautiful dog in this picture of Sherry and I. That dog came from Mexico. Sherry spoke fluent Spanish. She had a godson in Mexico. She's not Mexican, but she had a great affinity for the Spanish language and the Mexican people, and in her consulting taught people how to work, taught bosses how to work with their Hispanic employees and trained them, the Hispanics, in leadership in Spanish. So we have this, we wake up in the morning, and she had a godson in Mexico. And Sherry Jolly said, did we ever get in touch with him? And I thought, you know what? I never did hear from him. So I went and scrambled up his email to him and his aunt, and I sent them an email and told them what was going on. We got this email back from him, and they'd been estranged a bit because of an incident that happened down here at one point. And so she really hadn't talked to him in a while. He said, oh no, I don't know what I'm going to do without her. She was like a mother to me, which she was. We went down there quite a few times. It was our second family. It was an amazing relationship. And I sat there and read that email to Sherry, unconscious as she was. And Kathy in the kitchen said, when you read that, I felt an enormous wave of joy come through the kitchen. Like she was, wow, I'm so glad to hear from him. We thought, well, okay, maybe that helped. Then I go to lunch, come back, and we're still the same, no change. None at all. And I'm beginning to wonder what else could there be? Because I knew she had things to deal with. I knew she had problems, and we saw it. And so we thought, well, let's go back into the matrix and see if we can resolve the relationships with the Mexican godson and with the godson's aunt. And I'm also going to call in what's called the ancestors, who are spirits that may be connected physically, biologically or whatever with her, to come in and help and see if we can just make it easier for her. And she did. And so we prepared and got our stuff all set up and went back into the matrix. And Kathy said, stay on the lower level, don't go up to the second level. And while I was there, I kept kind of popping up to see what was up there, and I could see a couple more levels in the back, far away, going off in the distance, that I couldn't make out what was on them, but they must have been even earlier relationship matrices of Sherry's. That's my thought at this point. And she confronted these two, the spiritual parts of her godson and her godson's aunt. Kept one of them and let one of them go, and I don't know which one. So we're walking back down the steps. Her stepfather joins us, and he's right there with us. And we look off in the distance to Sherry's area, and we see a huge crowd of spirits and souls in that area. We see 3 or 4 people in front that look like they're in charge or whatever it is. And as we walk towards them, Kathy notices a bundle in one of their hands. She says, I don't know what that is. But we move closer. Sherry's still a little distracted. She's holding her stepfather's hand. And then Kathy says, it's a child. It must be one of the ancestors' children or something to comfort her or something. And Sherry suddenly notices. And all of a sudden she's horrified. She steps back. She says, stop. No, no, no. Get that away from me. I don't want that. No, no, no. And she's ready to run. Her stepfather grabs her hand and says, no, no, take it. It's a gift. It's a gift. And Sherry hesitates a moment and then reaches out 2 hands, holds the child this far out. Something passes between them. Kathy's saying, I don't know what this is about. I have no idea who this is. And then she draws the child in close, walks over to the sleeping area we've set up, and the 2 of them lay down and go to sleep. And we move back into the living room. There's tears, there's emotion. Kathy is saying, what just went on there? I have no idea what just happened. I said, I know what happened, because I had heard the story. It seems that when Sherry was 22, she'd gotten pregnant and had an abortion, and never emotionally dealt with it. I think her whole problem in not going over was the fear of facing her mother and the fear of facing the child she hadn't let live. The room was a lot more peaceful all of a sudden. Sherry's breathing changed a little bit. We had all had a good cry. It was just such an emotion-filled moment. And one of the nurses had joined us on that last journey, so she had seen the whole thing as well. Then a little bit later, we were just exhausted. We just chatted a little bit about it. We talked to Sherry. We just kind of sat there. This nurse, who was the night charge nurse, in charge of the whole thing, comes in. Very professional looking, all business, does the thing she has to do, checks the meters, and goes away. And we realize we've missed something. The morphine meter wasn't checked or reset, so we had to call her back. She came back in, and she looked around, and she saw we had some aromatherapy stuff out and things like that. And she said, okay, I'm taking my nurse hat off, putting my spiritual hat on. And she sat beside the bed. This is 11 o'clock at night, for like half an hour. Not a sound in the room. It's just communing. And then she looks up and she says, she's at peace now. She's farther away. You don't have to do any more journeys. Just let her absorb, let her process, and let time take its course. And she said all of the Indian tribes are drumming for her, even the Blackfeet who usually don't. And just get some rest. And she left. One other friend of ours who was there, Michelle, and about 10 o'clock she'd gone out the door to go home. And she said she went to her car, which was parked across the street, and nothing was around. It's 10 o'clock at night. It's dark. She got in the car, looked in the mirror, and she sees a coyote sitting back behind the car. And it was there for a little bit, and then it left. And she said she looked it up, and she found the coyote is some kind of either a trickster or a sentinel or a symbol that could be saying, "Good job. You did well." And she went home. So Sunday morning, we woke up. This is the 8th day. We come in, and her breathing, Sherry's breathing is totally different. It's a breath, 15 seconds, another one. It's really slowing down now, finally. There was one crisis. The machine ran out of morphine, and we had a whole rigmarole. Finally, the nurses said, we have to do a few things to clean her up a bit. Just go out and have some coffee somewhere. And a friend of ours, Denise, who had started the whole thing 8 days before, came and joined us, and we told her the whole story at that point. And she was surprised and kind of wowed by the whole thing. So we come back, and we just sit there, and we hold her hand, and she's just, whatever it is, she's communing with whatever she needs to commune with. And we figure maybe she'll just slip away this at night. But no, comes Monday morning, still there. Very slow breathing, but still there. And I thought, and Sherry Jolly said, you know what? She always wanted to know what people would say about her at the memorial. And we have all kinds of emails. We never could put that together for her to hear. But I went back and copied all these into a document and sent it to Kathy's phone, and Sherry Jolly read it to her, including one about our little dog that we'd had to give away, who had found a beautiful home. And so she finished that, and we're sitting there at 9:30 Monday morning. The front door opens. And remember Susan Leone, whose husband passed away, who had to leave, comes bursting in the door, walks up to the bed. That was the moment Sherry left. That instant. And we all just stood there, no tears. It was like a celebration. We had given her a gift, and she had given us a gift that neither of us thought anybody could give. I called Jim. He said a prayer for us. And now that it was over, I thought, that is something I've never heard of before. I've never heard of anybody doing all that stuff. And I thought, this is a gift from her. And it's a message from her for the world. It's something that, while she couldn't be here to do it, I'm here to do it. It's part of why I'm sharing the story. I also wrote a book about it, which has a lot of stuff on her background and so forth. Anybody who cares, you can see me. But I thought, okay, the immediate aftermath was, like you're up here, and all of a sudden you're at the bottom of the cliff. Kathy and Sherry were exhausted. They went home to get some sleep. Her friend Joy came in for a little while. The nurse came in. They cleaned up. They took all of their stuff away. Then the cremation people came and took Sherry away. And then the hospice people came and took all the equipment away. I'm sitting there in this empty living room. The rug is all mussed up. There's papers and stuff all over the place. The only thing I can think of to do is get out the vacuum cleaner and clean it up. And just process. Think about what had just happened. What was her message? What was she trying to tell people? And I had already been writing the book, but it was about caregiving. The whole focus changed all of a sudden. 2 days later, I went down to Laguna Beach and sat on this cliff overlooking the main beach on a little stool with a small little wall in front of it and a tree up there. And I thought, gee, Sherry is probably up in that tree, just guiding whatever's going on. There were some birds up there. And then this little bird comes down, lands on the wall, walks a little bit, then looks up at me and chirps. Chirp, 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 chirp. Then he gave one last big chirp and flew off. And I had my notes there and I started writing what had just happened. And then as the bird flew off, then the next sentence was, Sherry started her flight to eternity. And I thought, this is the start of the book. She just gave me the first paragraph. I couldn't do the memorial until January. It wasn't there. But she'd given us directions. And she said, everybody wears red. You have to do laughter yoga because she was an instructor. And you have to end it with the Macarena. And we did. Believe it or not, we did. We had 150 people in the room. Jim was there guiding it. 3 or 4 of us gave funny stories about Sherry, including her stepsister and several of her partners. And Kathy came up to me afterwards and said, you know what happened right after the laughter yoga? Said, I felt Sherry pop into my head. And I gave her kind of a silent, well. She said, wow, this is so cool, isn't it? And I thought, yes, this whole thing was so cool. Sherry went out the way she wanted to. She went out with her friends, with her closest people, with all of the people she had fun with, present, did it in style, did it in a way nobody else did. And I looked at all of this, and as I started writing, I thought, what is the message here? And it's not about passing. It's really about living. It's about who we are as individuals and how we do our lives. And I thought about hers and all of the things that had held her back. And I thought, what is she doing? And she knew it. She spent her entire life in counseling. She became a marriage family therapist, alcohol rehabilitation specialty, because she thought it would help her deal with it. She was pulling all of this baggage with her, like this. Instead of facing the future, she was half in the past, could never let go of it, until the last minute. I like to think that what we helped her do saved her from having to repeat this again. Because it resolved those relationships that were unresolved. And I realized we all have those. We all have those. And one of the biggest things in the self-help industry out there is getting over past traumas. We spend thousands of hours talking about it. And I looked back at my life and I thought, now wait a minute. Somewhere along the way, I let go of all that stuff. I don't know when, I don't know how. Might have been partly through the influence of our spiritual philosophy. But I thought, there's stuff, really bad stuff that I don't even remember. I had a great family, great college. Yeah, there was stuff there, but something good came out of it. And I thought, now wait a minute, that is one of the keys. Everybody looks at what bad came out of trauma. That was so horrible. They did that to me, so I can't do this. If that's familiar, I always said, what good came out of it? Whatever it was. I once had to quit a job because the boss was so horrible. I thought, I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't know where I'm going to go. There's no offers, there's no positions, there's nothing, but I have to get out of here. And it could have been really bad, and it was a horrible experience for a year. And I gave him my resignation notice like December 7th. There's no jobs happening during Christmas. Doesn't happen. 3 days later, but I knew something would. I didn't know what. 3 days later, I get the phone call from the person who'd started the newspaper with me years ago. He said, hey, I hear you just resigned. I said, yeah. I was a newspaper editor at the time. He said, I'm sitting here with Herb Sutton. He owns all the penny savers from Irvine to San Diego. He's just bought this little publication in Corona del Mar, and he's looking for an editor. Would you come down and have lunch with us? Yeah. I went down, had lunch. He said, come to work. We made a huge splash with this paper. We redesigned it, 4-color, put some things on that even the Register copied. And it even won the best newspaper in California 3 years in a row. I met my first wife because I went to work there. Imagine what had happened if I had not turned in that resignation at that instant. But I acted. I said, this is bad, but something else out there is better. And this is one of the messages I'm taking out to the world is, yes, we all have things that we don't like in our past. We all have things we deal with. We can either be like Sherry and say, I hated that to happen. I hated that to happen. I hated that to happen. Why did they do that to me? Or you can be like I turned out to be and say, well, I'm kind of glad that happened, bad as it was, because here's what the good part was. It got me this, it got me here, it got me out of that situation. What is the good in your life? What is the good that stands out? Because that's where we start facing forward. That's where we realize that this instant that we're in, right here, right now, that we're living, it's the only instant we have. It's the only thing we can change. We can't change the past. It's there. It's gone. Sherry kept trying to change the past. We helped her stop doing that. I don't want anybody else to have to go to 5 minutes before passing to do that. So that is the key message that I have. It's powerful. I'm spreading it as wide and far as I can. Sherry's story says things about current life and afterlife that we don't think about often. There are consequences to what we do, to what we say, to what we think, to how we act. And we have the power to change those. So we have a little time for questions.